What's up, gangsters? How about another 10 minutes, sort of technique? A topic that's come up a few times lately in Scale Modeler's Critique Group is how to hide decal edges when you don't have any choice but to use a decal. So let's take a look at how to do that. Okay, so let's take a look at the situation here. This is a test piece that I did earlier this year, and as you can see, it's got a couple of decals on it, and they are on there about as well as any decal is ever going to be applied. I think you could agree with that. They are melted thoroughly into the panel lines and the rivets. Even this really horrible Academy decal is on there pretty good. And then they had some dull coat sprayed over them. These were applied directly on the paint, as I typically do. That was part of the demonstration that I think I was doing at the time. But you can see that this would be a very frustrating situation because in spite of all that, even though there is no silvering, and silvering is specifically where you have air trapped underneath the decal. I think some people confuse silvering simply with reflectivity of the film. There is no silvering, but you can clearly see where the film is. It has a slightly different texture than the surrounding material. And that's just naturally going to happen because a decal is basically a couple of layers of lacquer paint that you're going to add on top of your other paint, and they may not have the same texture. They also have a certain thickness, especially this one here. You can really see it if I get it in the light correctly. It would help if this was not already flat coated, but there you go. You can see the edge. All right, the edge of it shows pretty well. And obviously, that would be very frustrating with a nicely applied decal to then have people go, oh, well, I can see the edges of your decal. The idea is to have them look like they were painted on, and obviously these don't because of that clear film, which is always a problem with decals like this, where you've got a lot of clear film that's required to connect the different sections together. Now, the obvious solution to this is just don't ever use decals for this kind of thing. Mask them and spray them. That's always going to be better for a bunch of reasons that I don't have to go into here. But there are situations where you just don't have that choice. Like, for example, stencils and placards. Those little Hamilton Standard logos that go on propellers of American World War II aircraft. Those are tough to hide the edges of, and they are obviously mostly clear film. So you don't have a lot of choice. You got to figure out a way to hide it and blend it in. So the secret here is that what I want to do is basically spray some clear coat around the perimeter of the decal and build it up all around here, and then sand it back down so that everything with the decal is basically all at the same level, and you don't have that little tiny step right there. So that's the basic strategy. And I'm going to apply a little bit of clear over the top of it because when I start sanding, obviously, I need a little bit of cushion on the decal itself. I don't want to immediately start messing it up. So the next question then is, what material do I want to use? Now, really, any sandable clear coat will do, which, in my opinion, immediately rules out like some of the things like Vallejo's clear gloss. I can't really speak to some of the other ones like the Gauzy or anything from Ammo or MIG or AK or whatever. But I do know that the Vallejo clears tend to be a little rubbery. They don't sand well. So you need either an acrylic that's going to harden into a nice hard shell, or you need a lacquer, in my opinion. Either one will work fine, but with a lacquer, what you want to be careful of is not to spray it too wet, because lacquer clears, especially ones like MRP, for example, their super clears are pretty hot. And even if you use something like GX100, which is Guns' really nice clear gloss. In fact, too nice, I think, for something like this. I think it's overkill, but it does build up nicely, which is what you want for this. And you thin that with Mr. Leveling Thinner. Even that, some people have found, can be too hot for decal film if you just really hose it on. And you are going to be applying it pretty wet to do this technique because you need to build up quite a bit of clear. So that's my only reason for not selecting a lacquer. You could use an acrylic like X22, but you have to thin it with something, and it works the best when you thin it with MLT. So again, not my first choice. You could thin it with X20A and that would be fine, but I prefer to never have to mix anything if I don't have to, because I'm basically lazy. Plus, Aqua Gloss, not only does it work great right out of the bottle, but it dries pretty quickly and it dries pretty hard. It's much more difficult to sand, for example, than say Future. It's one of the reasons why I counsel people not to use Future, because it's made to be stripped and it's relatively soft and it does not sand and polish up as well as this stuff does. So Aqua Gloss is my go-to utility gloss, and it's perfect for this particular application. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm not going to make you guys suffer through all of the spraying, especially since I'm already at like 6.5 minutes. But what I'm going to do is just show you real quickly how I spray it on there. I'm going to let it dry, and then off camera I'll come back and add as many layers as is required to get the job done, and then we'll take a look at it, and then I'll sand it. And it typically is, in my experience, it is 3 to 4 layers that will be required to get this done. So I'm just not doing anything special. This is Iwata Neo 0.35 millimeter needle. I use it for about 80% of my work. And so here we go. And you don't obviously want to just be a slob about it, but remember that the idea here is to build up a thick coat that you're going to blend with the surrounding area by sanding it. So that's not what I would call great spray discipline, and I've practically got some runs there. But again, not too concerned about it because I'm going to sand it all down. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just keep building this up, and then I'm going to come back and put the last layer on top of the entire decal. So I'll see you later when it's all done and dry and it's ready to sand. Okay, let's get back to this. It is actually the next day because I was going to let this harden for a few hours, but the truth is I forgot about it, got sidetracked, and that's fine. So now it's today and we can see what we are working with. I noticed as it was drying immediately after I sprayed it, though, that there was a little bit of wrinkling going on around the edges of the decal, and that's fine because this is typically a process that you have to do, like I said, 2, 3, maybe 4 times before it's done. But I think that what's causing that, I couldn't remember what kind of flat coat was on this. And I think that it may be K-Colors, which is an acrylic. and so I think that maybe there was a little bit of a bleed through or a little bit of an interaction that allowed that heavy dose of aqua gloss to affect the decal, which is a little bit surprising, but maybe not. I don't know. That's a terrible decal. But anyway, I purposely slathered the stuff on there because I don't want to do it very many times because this is just a demo and I want to see what I could get away with. When I did it, it looked like it was just really gloopy and these panel lines were all clogged up, but you can see it has shrunk down a lot. And that's, that's the reason why you have to do this multiple times. So anyway, I'm going to sand it. And what I'm going to sand it with is one of these Infini sanders. I like these a lot. This 1000 grit should work pretty well. I like these because the foam in them is stiff enough that it's not quite as firm as your fingertip on the back of a piece of just plain sandpaper, but it's pretty close. And I like that for something like this because you need something that's firm enough that it's not going to follow the little contour of the edge of the decal. You want it to actually flatten it off, and this works good for it. What I don't recommend is wet sanding for two reasons. One, it could affect something here. If you had hairspray under there and you accidentally burned through or something like that, and you had water on there, you could create a problem. The other reason, though, is because it's a little harder to see what's going on when you're wet sanding, because that water basically creates a liquid layer that hides every variation in the surface. And you want to be able to see exactly what's going on while you try to get the level of the top of the decal to match the level of the area around it. So I dry sand, even though it's a little bit more of a hassle. These Infini sanders clean out pretty well, so it's not too bad. But anyway, now it's just elbow grease. And I will be at this for a while, and I'll just come back and show you when I get to a point where I feel like I've got to stop and I'm either done or I can add another, or I have to add another coat. So here we go. And I'm already deciding that I may jump to a coarser grit because this is just going to take forever. This thing is already clogging up, and you can see. So anyway, onward. Okay, so here we go. I have done some rubbing on this thing, and I did go ahead and switch down to an 800 grit. And this is one of the reasons why I love these Infini sanders, because they are clearly labeled, so you know exactly what you're doing. The 1000 grit was just taking too long and clogging up too fast. The 800 cuts that aqua gloss quickly, but not so aggressively that I had to worry about burning through. And you can see what I've got here, and hopefully this will show up on camera. This is one of those times where I really feel validated that I use an optivisor when I do my finishing work, because you really have to be able to see some very subtle levels of detail. And there you can kind of tell right there by the 6 and the 2 where the edge is still showing a little bit. And there are some places along there where some of those, there are like some little pits right along the edge that came from that decal being wrinkled up. And they may show, there they are. See right there underneath the 0 and the 2. Okay, and I have another effect going on over here with the with this insignia. It's blending in pretty nice on the ends, but one thing that I'm noticing is that right here there's a color shift that I think is actually just caused by the decal film itself having being slightly cloudy or not being perfectly clear, like there's actually a little bit of color in it. Like think about a clear coat that turns yellow. It has a slight color shift even though you can still see through it. And if that's the case, what I'm doing here is not going to solve that at all, because what I'm doing is actually to hide a physical difference between the decal film and the surrounding paint. It isn't going to address an optical difference. And this is just one more reason why you should not be using decals. But I'm going to carry on, and now I'm going to show you a slight variation in the process here, because now I'm at the point where I only have a few areas that need more aqua gloss, and I really don't want to put down any more material than I need to. I also enjoy not having to clean an airbrush, so I'm going to use a paintbrush. And I'm going to go along here and just deal with those areas where I have an issue. You can think of this almost like a micro-filling process that you would do with putty, except not. Now I am going to, though, brush over the top of the decal itself at least a little bit, because remember, that's the high spot, and I don't want to run the risk of burning through into the decal while I'm sanding those areas. So just trying to keep that controlled and not get any more in any of these panel lines or anything than I have to. Okay, so it's a couple hours later. I didn't feel like waiting all afternoon on that aqua gloss to harden up, and I was kind of curious to see if I could get away with sanding it after only about 2 or 2.5 hours of cure time, and it was fine. Maybe a little soft, but it sanded out fine. And you can see that the surface is now uniform. I did not add any more of the aqua gloss, so the surface is now uniform, and the edges are flush. But you can see that I do have that variation in color underneath the clear part of the decal. And that's what I was talking about, where it's the film itself, and there's just nothing you can do about that. I might be able to go back and correct that with some oils or something. I was thinking about it, and it may also be because I was experimenting at one point on this test piece with some washes, and they may have gone on over the top of these decals. I can't remember. But one way or the other, there's a variation there. You can also see a bit of discoloration on this decal film. So it is what it is. But I'm about to spray some dull coat on this, and it'll be interesting to see if that has any effect on any of that. I will also point out at this time that if you start to feel like you're loading up some of your panel lines, as I kind of did here, that what my favorite thing is for cleaning paint out of panel lines is one of these Tamiya razor saws. I use them for scribing as well, but they're also really nice when you need to just clean a little bit of paint out of a panel line, because when the panel line is already there, it is pretty easy to drop this thing in there and just have it follow along in that panel line, and it does a good job of cleaning that out. So this is also a handy tool after you've done a bunch of sanding and so forth, and you've got a bunch of swarf in your panel lines. This is a good thing to use to clean them out. Anyway, let me spray some dull coat on this real quick, and I'll come back. All right, let's get this silly thing wrapped up. Here it is, about 15 minutes later, and I had put a nice thick layer of dull coat on this. I just splashed it on there with a rattle can because I didn't feel like cleaning an airbrush. And that was good enough to for the purposes of the test. So you can see definitely that there is evidence of the film there, but it's because of the discoloration. There is no physical difference. If I could drag my fingernail across that, it would not snag on any microscopic edges because those have been blended in. They're gone. Same thing over here with the cross. You can see where the edges would be because, again, the film has got a slightly yellower tone. And I'm actually kind of glad that happened because that's a good illustration of what you can reasonably hope to accomplish with a decal. I mean, if the film is discolored, or if it causes the paint underneath to look different, there's nothing you can do about that. And again, that's a good reason not to ever use decals if you can help it. But sometimes you don't have any choice. For either of these two things, these would both be masking. No problem. But I think it's instructive for what I was trying to show. You can see over here on the left side where the discoloration is not really there, that it is pretty difficult to see those edges. Okay, there you go. You can see that it definitely works. It's a little bit of elbow grease, but that's really all it is. There's nothing magic about it. It's just carefully applying some clear coat and then sanding it down. I also want to emphasize that I did all of the sanding with this 800 grit stick. You don't have to get crazy with any kind of really fine sandpapers or micro meshes or any of that stuff. You just either need a piece of straight sandpaper of anywhere from 800 to 1200 grit or a nice sanding stick like a UMP or one of these Infinis and a decent clear coat to do the work with. And that's all there is to it. It's just a matter of getting in there and doing it. But you can see that there are some limitations. If the film is discolored or whatever, then you're just kind of screwed, and it is what it is. But there you go. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. Much love.